Good day everyone and welcome back. So this is going to be a little bit of a different video. It's going to be a bit similar to my video on races with forearms as opposed to any of my other things, kind of like downtime, etc, etc. I don't know what you'd call this system, sort of like a... It's not dynamic, shifting ability system, I guess that's what you'd call it. So we've seen some preludes to this with like the Eladrin elves from Mordecai's Tome of Foes and the Godai domain clerics from Outlandish Adventure Productions and David Adams' Honor and Devotions, which, by the way, you can pick up on the DM's Guild with I'll leave a link to that in the description. Now, I had also been working on my own thing. Actually started working on this after the Eladrin came out, so it might seem like I'm just ripping them off with the theming of seasons and all that. However, I did actually start this concept a while back when I painted a group of 4 druids sort of in seasonal attire based on the different seasons. I figured I'd just sort of discuss my thoughts on this. So with my Circle of Seasons and the Honor and Devotions Godai Domain Cleric, there is actually quite a bit of overlap, but at the same time a few things that are quite a bit different. So to begin with, if you haven't seen my video on the Godai Domain Cleric, or you haven't read about it for yourself, then I suggest that you go and check that out. So with that out of the way, let's talk about how we went about things differently. So in Honor and Devotions, the Godai Domain Cleric, their main thing is they have these different domain spells as well as resistances and cantrips based off of what element they're currently representing, and they can shift between those, and then all of their mechanics mostly revolve around that shift. Which is a great way to do it. I really like how they actually reduce the number of domain spells available. However, I'm not terribly sure how that would run. I'd assume better than anything that I've come up with at the moment, but we'll see. How I ended up implementing a somewhat similar system is you'd have your seasonal embodiment, which would then give you different effects based on what the season was. I sort of mimicked how the Eladrin worked for this by taking on their sort of seasonal traits. So spring was very support-based, autumn was sort of like charm and manipulation, that sort of thing. Winter was very cold and distant, possibly tankish in nature. I based that off of fear and how that differentiates from a charm. And then summer was basically just pure damage and aggression, so it made sense to do things like adding extra fire damage on specific things. For autumn, adding the ability to aid allies by allowing them to add an extra bit to their saving throws against being charmed. As a reaction, winter kind of got the short end of the stick with a simple damage resistance and a small bit of temporary HP whenever they swap to winter. And then spring, they get a bit more healing. Not so much as to rival the Life Domain Cleric, but enough to make it quite interesting. On top of that, they also got the seasonal spells, which is somewhat similar to how the Godai Domain spells, as well as the Circle of the Land spells. I mimicked the Circle of the Land spells a bit more closely than the Godai spells, though. So every druid level, like 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th, they gain 2 spells, as opposed to mimicking the Godai domain, where every 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, and 9th, they only gain 1. So there's a lot of similarities there. The big shift between the two actually comes with the second ability. So for the Godai domain, that is shifting. So they shift to a different type. They get it earlier, They get it earlier than the seasonal druids do, but, you know, they shift to a different type, which is really interesting and works quite nicely for them. They don't get anything special from shifting types to begin with, which is great. I really appreciate that, because it makes the additions that come later a lot more interesting. Whereas for me, I went with sort of this idea of a seasonal boon, so you'd be able to activate it to generate like this area of effectability that could aid others around you for X amount of time. So I'll just use summer for an example. You can basically activate it as an action. This is a once per long rest ability, by the way. So you activate it as an action, and choose up to 6 creatures within 15 feet of you. For the next hour, those creatures are resistant to cold damage, as long as they remain within... I'm currently saying 20 feet, however I might reduce that back down to 15 again, or I might increase the range of the base ability to 20, I don't know. And then additionally for the next 6 hours, the caster, so the druid, and any creatures within 15 feet of them are considered to have naturally adapted to cold climates, as described in the Dungeon Master's Guide, Chapter 5. The reason behind that was it's meant to be more of a support ability, so it's going to have a more general use, and then something that you might use occasionally. That sort of thing. Then the seasonal druid doesn't get their shift until level 10. Their shift takes a wild shape as opposed to taking a channel divinity, so it's working on a very similar premise of using a specific type of resource to change. The seasonal shifts are actually quite similar to how the Tip the Scales channel divinity works for the Godai domain. After level 6, where they get their explosive radius of elemental damage. However, it's only the summer shift that gets that. Also, these shifts are temporary as opposed to like the Godai domain where they last for the rest of the day, or until you shift again. They differ there quite a bit, but the idea behind the seasonal shift was it's like how you can have a heat wave in the middle of winter that suddenly makes it so you can wear, shorter, lighter clothes, etc., etc. Sort of going off that sort of thing. They're very similar to the combination of the Explosive Attunement and the Tip the Scales for the Godai domain, because they have area of effect abilities that are based off of their different purposes that you can use. Well, that go off as soon as you perform the shift. And then finally, their final ability for each of the subclasses, so for the Druid that is multi-seasonal existence, and for the Godai domain cleric is Conduit of Balance. Now, I had forgotten that the Godai domain did this when I was designing the seasonal druid, so the fact that they both ended up being able to have two embodiments at the same time, as I call it, so for the Godai domain they have 2 prime elements, so it might be like fire and earth. For the druid it might be like summer and spring at the same time. Things like that. I just find it really interesting that we both ended up with that. It might be a case of I had just forgotten and I was subconsciously recalling on the knowledge of the Godai domain, and that's how that came about. I think the biggest difference between them is that the Explosive Attunement from the Godai domain only reacts to one element, so you have to choose what element you explode with, I guess, whereas the multi-seasonal existence, when you perform your shift, if you choose to change both, then you can activate both effects. I don't know which one's better. I'm going to assume that the Godai domain has a lot of benefits that mine doesn't, and it's probably a bit more balanced because they actually have gone through playtesting at the moment. I just wanted to discuss the different ways that you could go about doing things, like having the ability to sort of dynamically change what your character is capable of by using these sort of I'm going to call them Eladrin-based classes, when they're not really, but it's using a similar mechanic, so I may as well call them that. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you agree with me, then sweet, let me know. If you disagree, then also let me know. I'd love getting feedback. If you feel like it, leave a thumbs up, leave a thumbs down, it's fine. Subscribe if you want to. I'm going to have a lot more content these days, I hope. I should have more time to be able to pull that off. There should be another episode of Downtime coming out next week, as long as I can get a hold of Wade, otherwise it'll just be me talking to myself again. And cheers! I'll see you next time.